Hey, you, quick question. Where do we digest food? If the first thing that comes to mind is in the stomach, then you're wrong. Misinformation is all around us, but it turns out it's also inside you. So today, we'll be giving it the treatment of science with 5 myths about the human body you most likely never thought of questioning. Number 1. Humans have 5 senses. You learn pretty darn early at school that humans have 5 senses: sight, hearing, smell, taste, and touch. However, it turns out this is completely false. In fact, it's a claim that was made all the way back around 350 BC in the book De Anima by famous Greek philosopher Aristotle. And it just stuck for 2,400 years.
The truth is, scientists now know better, and the consensus is... Come on, guess a number. Got it? Well, you just wasted your time because there is no consensus. All we know is it's more than 5, and the exact number varies depending on the field of science you come from, how you define separate senses, and probably how tasty the breakfast at the research center was that day.
For example, one of the most widely accepted counts in neuroscience is 9 senses, adding thermoception, the sense of temperature, nociception, the sense of pain, equilibrioception, the sense of balance, and proprioception, the sense of your own body, to the aforementioned 5. This comes from defining a sense as a group of cells dedicated to sensing a specific physical phenomenon, plus a separate neural pathway that processes it.
However, you can also divide senses by their type of neural signal, and this can actually give you counts as high as 17, as something like taste can be divided into sweet, sour, salty, bitter, and umami, which, by the way, we'll get to in a bit, you'll see.
Further subdivisions and the inclusion of stuff like the sense of internal chemistry, such as the one that allows us to feel hunger, can raise the number up to 21, but some sources give ranges of 22 to 33, although, to be honest, I find some of them a bit far-fetched. Still, what's clear is that it's much more than 5. And unfortunately, it doesn't seem like schools are gonna stop giving kids this misconception anytime soon. Number 2. The taste map. Among the senses, however many there is one which is even more surrounded by misinformation: taste. Specifically, I'm talking about this: the map of the tongue by the different tastes. The idea goes, every section of the tongue is specialized to detect a particular type of taste. Sweet at the tip, salty on the sides, sour further back along the sides, bitter at the back, and umami kind of everywhere. But, as it turns out, there is no such thing as specialized taste buds. Even though gustatory cells, the cells that detect taste, mainly contain either type 1 for sweet and umami or type 2 for bitter taste receptors, each taste bud contains a mix of 50 to 100 of these cells, so you can taste every flavor at every single point of your mouth. However, where this myth came from is just as interesting. In 1901, Dirk Pauli Hanig, a German researcher, published a paper titled The Psychophysics of Taste. In it, he devised a graph showing the taste thresholds in different regions of the tongue. Admittedly, the difference between these thresholds was minimal, basically unnoticeable. However, in 1942, Harvard psychologist Edwin Boring published a book in which he renormalized this graph to visualize it more easily. The thing is, it ended up being very misleading, as instead of showing minute differences, it seemed to suggest that for each taste there was full perception in some areas and none whatsoever in others. This led other people to adapt this apparently groundbreaking graph into a visual map of the tongue showing the peak zones for each taste. And it just stuck.
This shows how gravitating towards ever simpler images can corrupt the truth. But mainly, why do we keep teaching this at schools?
Number 3. We only use 10% of the brain. Ah yes, a classic. The myth that the human brain only ever attains about 10% of its true capacity, and there's some untapped intellectual power inside us which we can never reach. To be honest, just saying this out loud shows how absolutely ridiculous the idea is. However, a survey from 2013 showed that a whopping 65% of Americans believe this, so there's some serious debunking to be done here.
You might have actually already read an article clearing this up. they usually go along the lines of people misinterpreted the fact that only 10% of neurons fire at the same time at any given moment as meaning that only 10% of the brain is actually used. However, not even this is actually true. So, I'm not kidding, this whole thing came quite simply from people taking the "we never reach our full potential" thing too seriously. And also, the 10% figure is misleading at best.
First of all, if we're talking about what percentage of the volume of the brain is active at any given moment, it's closer to 100%. Basically, all areas are at least doing something, even if unrelated to the task at hand. And the fraction of firing neurons, with each neuron having a very brief pulse and only activating when necessary, is a very bad indicator of brain activity. Still, all of this hasn't stopped people from trying to unlock this hidden potential through all kinds of means, from weird meditation techniques to passing electrical currents through their brain to literally drilling holes in their own skull to allegedly increase blood flow. Yikes.
All in all, none of the brain is useless, you use 100% of it, and in fact, if you even slightly damage any part of it whatsoever, you might get irreversible and heavily impairing brain damage.
Number 4. Left brains and right brains.
And if you thought 65% was bad, take this. A whopping 77% of teachers still think that there are left-brained people who are more analytical and logical and right-brained people who are more creative. And if you did too, well, we're here to debunk that. I mean, to be fair, this one is a bit newer. It comes from some more recent studies into how the hemispheres of the brain handle different tasks.
If you didn't know, the brain is divided into two hemispheres, left and right, and as it turns out, the left hemisphere seems to mostly take care of stuff like language and logic, while the right brain is mostly in charge of other things like spatial processing or emotions. Also, the right hemisphere controls the left side of the body, while the left hemisphere controls the right side. But, this is not a myth, it's an actual thing, and it makes sense because it allows us to multitask more effectively.
What is a myth, though, are the interpretations that started arising, again due to people always trying to oversimplify everything. They took these findings as meaning that more creative people must have a dominant right hemisphere, while more logical people must have a dominant left hemisphere. Of course, neural lefties and righties are not a thing, but they seemed like such a useful categorization to be able to make, and again, it kinda just stuck.
Number 5. We digest food in the stomach.
So, for the last place, we've got a bit of a hot take. Digestion doesn't actually happen in the stomach. Mostly. So, when we think of digestion, the signature organ always seems to be the stomach. But when you actually look at what goes on in this process, you realize maybe it shouldn't be.
Digestion can be divided into three main locations: the mouth, the stomach, and the small intestine. In the mouth, your saliva begins to break down starches and fats through the enzymes amylase and lipase respectively, and also performs some mechanical digestion through chewing. By the way, fun fact, amylase breaks down starch into simple sugars, so if you keep a piece of bread in your mouth for some time, it'll start to taste sweet. Anyway, then the food goes into the stomach, where these enzymes keep acting on it, and a new one, pepsin, is released to start breaking down proteins, while stomach acid turns it into a liquid. The stomach then acts as a kind of storage tank, so that this food material can be released into the small intestine for thorough and controlled digestion. This is why people without a stomach have to eat in small, frequent meals. They have to do that controlled release themselves. And the third stage is the small intestine, where both the pancreas and the intestine itself start releasing a whole cocktail of enzymes that break down everything there is to digest in the food. This occurs over a period of 2 to 6 hours, and it's also the part where basically all of the nutrients are absorbed. All in all, a negligible fraction of digestion happens in the mouth. I mean, after all, it only spends a few seconds there. About 5% happens in the stomach, and the remaining 95% happens in the small intestine. I mean, seeing it like this, the stomach is basically just for storage and release into the small intestine, where digestion really happens.
So there you go. I hope I was able to save some minds from some painfully false information. And hopefully this kind of thing will make people more aware of how they approach information, and especially incite some teachers to check their facts. Anyway, if you enjoyed the video, I'd really appreciate it if you could like and subscribe. It takes a lot of time to make this, and that helps a lot. Thanks for watching, and I'll see you in the next one.